It's time for the show about the people and the places of the Carolinas, with the occasional visitors. In addition to hosting the award-winning syndicated TV show Life in the Carolinas, Carl White writes a weekly syndicated column and now hosts this weekly show, the Life in the Carolinas podcast. Now you can hear the story about the stories. And now, here's your host, Carl White.
Now I know the rules. Everything's fine.
All right, John Santa, good to see you.
Good to see you, sir. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming in and sharing a bit of your life with us. You brought a friend. You brought a doctor. Do you travel with a doctor everywhere you go?
At all times.
At all times.
Yeah, look at me. I need a doctor.
At all times.
Yes.
Well, there you go. Well, you know what you need, so you're covering your weakness.
Yep.
So that's fantastic. You know, when you and I talked on the phone a few days ago, I was making a lot of notes, and then I'd gone to your website already and learned about your not-for-profit, which is really why we're here today, or at least a part of why we're here today. And I'll tell you why it's a part of why.
Okay.
After you and I talked that same night, I was talking to a good friend in Gold Hill, North Carolina, Vivian Hopkins. And I said to Vivian,
amazing, Vivian Hopkins.
I said, Vivian, do you know John Santa? And she said, well, of course I do. And then we talked about 15 minutes. And
Carl, all these charges were dropped or we settled out of court.
Right.
I just want to be clear.
Well, it's good. It's good. Well, she said you both had counsel and everything was fine. She shared with me the stories about your love and appreciation for bluegrass music. I think she said you were the one who introduced her to the Rhodes Scholar program in North Carolina, or made a recommendation.
Sure did. Yes, the North Carolina Humanities Council.
Right.
Sadly, COVID closed it down. They used to have a program called the Rhodes Scholar, which people used to come up to me. I have a book out, and when I would do readings, people would come up and go, "You should be a Rhodes Scholar," right. and I was like, "No, I'm not smart enough," because I thought it was RHODES, but it's actually ROADS.
Right.
And then, when I met Vivian, she actually read my book, which led us to kind of get together, and. When I met her, she's fascinating and a terrific person, and she knows a lot about white lightning up this way.
Right.
And
she knows a lot about a lot of things.
And I said, you should do a program on white lightning for the Humanities Council, and she helped her put together a pitch, and they were like, yeah, this is fabulous. And she was great.
Right. Well, I know she does a lot around Gold Hill and the history of gold in the Carolinas. Yeah. So that's a fascinating. I guess the point of that mention for you is that your reputation is out there with people that I respect, and I respect any part of our storytelling, any part of our heritage celebration that deals with it from that humanity standpoint. Because I think when we look at it in that context, it lets us know a lot more about how we're all connected. Sometimes not wanting to be, but we are anyway, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a cool thing. I'm hoping, since we're somewhat post-COVID now, that the Rhodes Scholar programs are going to get back at it.
Boy, I hope so. I love the Humanities Council. I've always been very, very proud to have worked with them and for them for a number of reasons, but not the least of which is we very often end up going in libraries, and Charles and I were discussing on the drive up here to how important libraries are in this country, and people don't realize. One of the things I always say that tends to get people's attention is the library is, I think, the last and only place you can go in the United States of America where there is no expectation that you will spend money or money will be exchanged.
Right.
And that you can spend however much time you need without any monetary concern. And that's a pretty cool thing.
And I think what you're saying there is important. Obviously, we can go to the library online now, which is a wonderful resource. But that experience of being in that building and being with the books and being able to sit down And even though we're not supposed to make a lot of noise in the library, I still find myself meeting friends there. I talk to a lot of people at the library because you find that there are people that have something in common, and that is they're there to learn something.
Yeah. And North Wilkesboro, what a great facility.
Right.
The library here is.
Right.
Library.
Yeah, it truly is. And I just have a great fondness for libraries in general. I just love the way they smell. You walk in and it smells like ink and paper, and it's wonderful. And then the librarians are these wonderful custodians of our babies, of the work that we do, of the books that we put out.
Right. That's exciting. Now, Charles, you're traveling with Mr. Santa today, and you have a reason for that. So you like libraries, of course, but there's other reasons. You like music, right?
Absolutely.
As a way of introduction for John and the organization that now you're both part of, tell us all how the two of you met.
Yeah, so, for all of the bad things that came out of COVID, there were a lot of good things that came out of it. And one of it was when operating rooms were shutting down and elective cases couldn't be scheduled, I had free time on my hands, and I had an old guitar that was sitting around my house and said, you know what, I've got time. I'm going to figure out how to play this thing now. And so John and I sort of met through a online service that matches student to teacher for guitar, and the stars lined up because I was in Greensboro. He was moving from Chapel Hill to Reedsville. I was looking for a teacher. He was obviously looking for students, and it couldn't have lined up more perfectly. And of course, one of the things on his website and during our conversation was that his policy for teaching guitar was to first do no harm, which was the exact parallel of what we talk about in medicine as well.
Sure.
So it just meshed completely. And then I sort of was looking for a way to transition from actively practicing surgeon to actively practicing musician, and it completely streamlined into that.
I have to interject. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but when we first met, I said, "What's the plan?" He goes, "Oh, maybe another 5 years medicine and then play the guitar." And I just looked at him and I said, "Oh, but you don't understand. Me and my miscreant friends, we're going to screw all of that up." And literally 2 years later, since that conversation, he's now retired. He's no longer a vascular surgeon. He is what we call a vascular musician.
That's great. So, something happened. I mean, you were changing.
Not the bug.
Yeah, but you were changing the world with the work you were doing then, right?
Absolutely. Well, the other part of that was, in our conversations, I learned through John about Marathon Jam as well.
Okay.
And
I'm always wearing our T-shirts.
Right.
I am a walking billboard for them.
So the connection there was, as physicians and surgeons, we're wired to help people. So if we're not helping people when we're at work, I'm always looking for, some sort of charitable organization that we can help out as well. Absolutely. It's just what you do. And the biggest thing that's always been important to me is that money went to the charity and not to the overhead and the organization. And again, the stars lining up, I asked if he knew about any sort of charities, and the answer, of course, was, "Why, yes, I do."
As a matter of fact.
We have one of those, right?
And again, it was sort of one of those things where a lot of these smaller grassroots charities have really suffered during COVID. So it really lined up, and that's sort of what meshed our relationship even more.
Okay. So you go online, you find someone to teach you music, guitar, right? You meet John, and I'm trying to get there. I understand. I have a lot of friends in the medical field, and it was a very stressful time.
Sure.
COVID was emotionally heavy on everybody involved, right? But for you to meet a teacher, start taking classes, and within that scope of this pandemic starting and having some type of a conclusion, right? To where the world is kind of back at it again on certain levels. You actually, something inspires you so much that you retire even earlier than you had thought. So was this because you mastered the guitar so much, you mastered music so much? I mean, what is it that, if you had to point at one thing, why did you make that big move that quickly?
Right. Well, I'd always been passionate about music. You know, growing up through school, I played piano, I played drums.
Okay.
And I had to put all that aside in a way when I chose this different career pathway. So it was an opportunity for me to get back on that pathway again. And plus, it was still an opportunity as a caregiver to give back. Because, sorry.
Oh, buddy. I feel the same way.
Music is curative. And it was just it was a time for me to be able to go from one mode to another,
right,
and still be able to provide that for people.
Wow.
The Marathon Jam is we're a quasi-military kind of, obviously we started taking care of veterans. Now we've added first responders, and like the Marines, Semper Fi,
right.
The Army units have their Latin mottos. Our Latin motto is Curatus Per Musica, healing through music. And that really resonated for Charles.
Have you seen it? Have you seen that happen? Have you seen the power of music?
Unfortunately, because of COVID, John's organization usually plays the VA hospital circuit.
Right.
And so we haven't been able to visit the VA hospital. But absolutely, I've seen it. And I've seen it through my own playing and singing, because people from the earliest days of civilization have tapped on logs, have beat on their legs, have chanted sounds, and it just resonates with people.
Is it the rhythm?
It's not.
No?
It's not the rhythm. It's the vibrations. It's what. I mean, they've done lots of studies that the chemicals that are released in your brain are the same chemicals that are released from medications for pain.
Wow.
So those same exact chemicals get released from just playing music and just hearing and feeling music. So
a lot of the great musicians have taken whatever pain, like comedians, and channeled that into the music. And there is. I do songwriting seminars sometimes, and I get a kick out of the people who walk in with books and stuff.
Right.
Because the first thing I always say to them is there's two things that human beings have done since the beginning of time that you don't really need a book for. One of them is having babies, and the second one is playing music. Because there is no culture on this planet that does not have music.
But there are lots of books about those subjects, John.
That's true.
Yes.
And you can buy them, but you don't really need them. You just do it. I mean, you can.
Wow.
Look, it's belaboring the analogy there or the metaphor, but I'm not saying, hey, ladies, don't go to the hospital and have your baby. Absolutely go to the hospital and have your baby. But we've been doing that for a long time, and the same thing is, since there's been people, there's been songs. And I agree with Charles. It's the vibration. I think there is a rhythmic aspect, because I think some of it is heartbeat.
Right.
We hear that the fetal heartbeat. You hear your own heartbeat, your mother's heartbeat, and that's the 2/4 or the 4/4 time that beat. That's why so many songs are written to a 120 beats per minute.
That's right.
Correct,
Yes.
Doctor?
Right.
And
And certain musics do that, right? I mean, I know there's certain musics that calms me. And I have friends that they're calmed by an entirely different, vibration.
And memories are such music is such a great thing to put memories into. Music holds memories, I think, almost better than smell. You can smell something and, I don't know, whatever that smell is, and you're back to that barbecue in the backyard with your
Right.
mom and dad when you were 10 or whatever. But boy, music, you can hear a song or even a fragment of a song and you're gone.
Sure. Sure.
It's a beautiful thing.
It takes you to a place. Before we got started, I said something, and you said, that's a John Prime line.
Prime's line, yeah.
And storytellers like John,
Yeah.
and there are many, many great storytellers in music, when they talk about things and sing and bring it to life with their own vibrations, right? And it's something that relates. The more people, the more human it is, the more that it touches us, no matter who you are, whether you're a surgeon, whether you're a music teacher, whether you're a Marine, or whether you're a Navy person or in the Army, whoever you might be, or you're a civilian, which is what most people are, right? Or you are the bee farmer that I meet at the weekend farmers market, who actually during the daytime his job is EMS, right? So he spends all this time of picking up our human pieces, if you will,
Literally.
and
In
literally,
many cases, yeah.
and dealing with the most gruesome things of our existence. Taking them to the hospital where you could put them back together, right?
Right.
Gunshot wounds, all these things, or you did.
Sure.
And it's nature, it's the rhythm, it's the vibration of earth that gives him peace, right? Because he tells me he loves the bees.
Oh, yeah.
He likes hearing them, the sounds, that just does something to him. So that's nature's music, right?
Yep, yeah.
Wow. So really music, this thing of music healing.
It's just magic.
Yeah.
It's just magic.
So that's the most powerful thing that we can talk about, really, right?
Well, for me, I've spent literally my whole life, almost literally, since I was 13. I mean, I started playing, and that was it for me.
Right.
There was nothing else I wanted to do. At one point, got called over for a Sunday dinner with mom and dad. My sister, we're sitting around the table, and my mom leans back and goes, well, you want to tell him or should I? And you tell her. Honey, we love you, but you've been trying this music thing for a long time. You're in your mid-30s. Hadn't happened yet. And it's, you're got to think about it. This is like, becoming a football star or a basketball. It's 1 in a million kind of shot to make it big. And, you're always struggling, and we admire you for what you've wanted to do, but it's time to, when you were a childlike things, now it's time to be an adult. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Well, we're not going to help you with the car insurance anymore. We're not going to be slipping you money to help you.
Wow.
Still love you, still welcome here. We'll help if you need it, but you need to go get a job.
So, John, when you got the message, hey, you're going to have to pay your own insurance. I mean, was that heavy news?
Oh yeah, it was tough to hear, but it was the truth, and they helped me recognize the truth, and it was a hard truth for sure, but I wasn't really mad at them because, at some point, you got to do what you got to do.
Sure.
So I went off and became the night operations manager out at RDU Airport, because being a musician for most of my life, I was used to late hours. So I worked for CF Air and did that for about a year, and then was called to another Sunday dinner. And there were plenty in between, don't get me wrong, and everything was fine, but called to a Sunday dinner, and same kind of thing. Mom leans back at the end of the meal, says, you going to tell her or am I? My dad, you can tell there's a pattern there.
Right.
And my mom says, honey, we want you to quit your job. I'm like, what? And we appreciate you trying to do what we wanted you to do, and we feel like you've done that, but you're not you. You're a completely different person, and you are not happy.
Wow.
And we're your parents, and we want you to be happy. So you need to go back and play music, because that's what God put you here to do.
Wow.
And
Were you feeling the same thing? Could you tell a difference in you?
oh, yeah, I was miserable. I mean, you just, there's the target, keep your eyes on the, there's as with medicine, there's a certain amount of discipline in learning an instrument. I play about 22 instruments, so, cello and guitar and stuff, and so you get some degree of discipline and self-realization, and they were right. So I'm just going to plow this field, and no matter how hard it is, you get up and, just like the rest of America, you get up and do it. You go to the job you hate and do it and cash the paycheck and keep going. And because they were right. But what amazing human beings my parents are to have released me from that. And
how long did it take you to turn in your resignation?
I don't know that I had a cell phone with me back then, but it would have been on the way home for sure. I think that was on a Sunday, and the following day, Monday, I'm sure I went in and gave my 2 weeks and said, by the way, if you don't need me, I'll be glad to leave sooner. And it was tough, but it was also really good, because then I had to reevaluate how and what I was doing, and music's a weird thing. I haven't won any Grammys or anything for the music I've written, but I have written music for films and videos, and I've had 14 women walk down the aisle to get married to a song I wrote.
I thought you were going to say you've been married 14 times.
No, that's Charles's job. We'll hand that off to Charles.
That's his third PhD. Right?
But that's a pretty cool thing when you think about the family. Those people, when they hear that music, where they go in their heads.
There's a reason when Cone Health redesigned their operating rooms that there was a committee and a pivotal amount of deliberation on what sound system was going to be installed in the operating rooms. And it was a
thought out
high priority item from the surgeons that music be in the operating rooms and be high quality and high variety.
Okay, here.
And those surgeons have their own list. When they go in and you take that room, that's yours. And the charge nurses or people know to run your music.
Absolutely.
Correct?
So, Charles, that's the question. What was on your list?
Oh, God.
This may make his head pop off.
Yeah.
But no, it's interesting. I sort of evolved because initially, when I came to Cone, I played a lot of sort of borderline metal for all the Nickelback haters out there.
Okay.
And then it evolved into, he really wants it to come out. Yeah. I still, to this day, listen to a lot of Ed Sheeran. And in defense of that, the music is relatable. And when I retired, my OR team said to me that one of the things they would miss the most was the music that I brought to the operating room, because it wasn't just a metal song or a Ed Sheeran song. It might be a country song. It might be a bluegrass song. But the best was when the patient gave a request. So I had a patient who was a Beatles cover musician, and we played the Beatles for an hour and a half during his operation.
Wow, that's really cool. So, and when I met him, he didn't know who John Prine was. Speaking of John Prine,
now.
He knows, and he knows the Beatles catalog inside and out. We've done major surgery on their songs for Charles as an aspiring songwriter. So
was there a type of music, a type of rhythm, a type of vibration that you could say, Carl, with this one, we saw a better outcome, or the process of healing was quicker, or the people were happier. I mean,
he's very good at this.
Was there? I'm just curious. I want to know.
I don't know that it necessarily directly affected, but I can tell you that my OR staff would put on certain types of music when things were not going well. And they knew the cues for that.
Right.
So from the overall global perspective, absolutely outcomes were better, because when everything's going haywire, that was the redirect. And all of a sudden, some sort of banter for a few seconds about, hey, did you ever hear this other song? That was a calming influence to bring organization to chaos.
So are you saying that this was chaos internally, or are you talking about societal chaos at the moment, or
surgical chaos, yeah,
or just the experience at that moment?
The experience of the moment, because in that operating room, things don't always go to plan.
Right.
And when things fall apart, you've got to pull it back together.
Right.
And the OR staff understands that the surgeon is the captain of that ship.
Was there a moment when, the music started one way and things started going bad? And when we're talking about going bad, I mean, it's complications and this may not go good. Did someone switch the music?
Oh, absolutely.
So it's almost like it's helping stimulate the emotions, the senses, and help. Was it to help bring everybody to that place of focus and just being able to be in that moment?
Those particular songs, the whole crew, his whole staff knew, okay, and that helps them come together, because it's like, it's like the old Star Trek, red alert,
Right.
that they're playing the song, we got to get this guy back.
Right.
And
so
there were musicians that were put in the penalty box on occasion as well.
Right.
That if that music didn't really lend itself to the situation, for sure.
Right. Okay, so you might have a moment where you need to slow down a bit, rather than maybe the music, the tempo was too high, and you need to really focus.
Right.
And it's like, okay.
and it's not just me. I don't want this to be about me at all, because in the operating room in general, it's multiple people. I mean, I trained and did my vascular surgery training at the Mayo Clinic, and I don't know how he did it, but one of my mentors at Mayo, somehow every time he went to put a clamp on the aorta, Kenny Logan's Danger Zone would inevitably come on. Inevitably.
That's fabulous.
Wow.
And one of my senior partners, whenever he got ready to clamp the aorta, Tina Turner's Simply the Best would come on. So it's not...
I mean, those are important moments.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can go wrong.
Yeah,
go quickly there.
Big time
Absolutely.
wrong.
Yeah.
That's is that probably some charge nurse knew? Just no idea. Yeah.
Because they know.
Charge nurses are amazing.
It's a small family.
Absolutely.
And they know.
All right. So are you saying, Charles, that this experience of life, and when you're doing your job as a surgeon, that the tempo, the music has made you a better surgeon?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because not only that, but I was able, to a certain degree, to communicate to my staff what my mood was. So depending on the music that was playing, they know what's going on in my mood at the time. And that makes a difference.
So are you saying that a tight-knit group, if they're in tune with what's going on, somebody's going to get the right tune playing?
Right. And they're brilliant. They're brilliant at accommodating that. I mean, when you've got anesthetists giving people breaks and wanting to come to your room because they know what's going to be playing in that room.
Right.
It's a team effort.
Was there a moment that you can go back in time and just think, about a particular case? We won't name names, but a particular operation that, you can say, oh my gosh, I remember the moment that this tune came on, and I remember how it just changed the dynamic of everything, and I was able to do what I had to do at that moment.
Absolutely. There was one time that we were having a really difficult time getting a wire to go where we wanted it to go. And the next song that came on was Kenny Rogers singing "The Gambler." You got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them.
Right.
And I'm not convinced it wasn't intentional, but the charge nurse, again, it was one of those sort of scenarios where it's like, okay, this is not going to work. We got to move on. And I'll remember that song coming on forever.
That's cool.
Because every time afterwards, he would always walk down the hallway and
Right.
sort of hum a few bars.
Nice.
Let's talk about it in the broader scope now. So, because you're retired now from one area, but music is still a big part of your life, maybe a bigger part now than ever has been.
Absolutely.
Right? So can we begin to transition this a little bit into that conversation about music and its power to heal? We, of course, are talking about veterans. We're talking about first responders. We deal with PTSD, and PTSD, of course, is talked about more now than ever.
Yeah, thank
right?
God.
And not only for those who serve, but for individuals who, you're in a car wreck or you see something dramatic happen, or are you seeing that in your organization now, that, when you're bringing music, you do your marathons, but it's all for the benefit of those who have served? And do you kind of feel a little bit like doctors even now?
Absolutely.
There's sort of two components of Marathon Jam. One, if you play the 12 hours or 10-hour whole thing, Marathon Jam, you get the coveted black T-shirt and you're an iron picker. Okay,
Right.
But we also have the Marathon Jam hospital volunteers, and those are the people who volunteer to play in the VA hospitals. And I'm really proud to tell you that this is a grassroots, no money, it's all volunteer. Marathon Jam has musicians, pre-COVID, in Fayetteville, the VA's in Fayetteville, in Durham, Kernersville, Salisbury, Charlotte, and we're trying to get into the big facility up in Asheville. Mm-hmm. We've basically got the entire state covered, all volunteer. And as soon as the VA says, yes, people can come back in, which they've had to stop because of COVID, we'll be back in there. And I can tell you, I played for a bunch of veterans at the Durham VA for over 5 years, and I missed those men and women very much. We became friends over that time, and not being able to go in and see them it's awful. And I miss the interaction. We learned very early on that sometimes we go in there. Well, we did two things early on. One was I told the guys, sit down, because almost all the people are in wheelchairs. Mm-hmm. A lot of the Gulf War people, IED things, don't have limbs, they're in wheelchairs.
Right.
So I thought that made a huge difference because we're eye level to them. And I didn't want it to be us standing up and performing. And the other thing I learned pretty quickly was sometimes we go and sing, and sometimes they just want to talk.
Right.
And we're happy to just pass the time with them and spend a couple hours going wherever they want to go. And it's a wonderful thing. I didn't serve personally. My dad was in the Army, and when we started Marathon Jam, we were very focused on Fort Bragg and the Fort Bragg Fisher House. So I'm particularly prone towards Army and airborne all the way, boys. And so it was a lot of fun because we'd be up there playing in the middle of a song, and somebody would roll in, and even in the middle of the song, oh God, the Navy's here. Oh geez, everything's going to go downhill now. And it was just great how they picked at each other, and we were pretty easy to become part of that. They were very generous in welcoming us kind of into their club, as it were. And one of the first things I had to tell people who were new, who were going to come and play at the VA, is you're going to be sitting there and you're going to be strumming and you're going to look out and you're going to see stumps going up and down. Mm-hmm. And it's a little disconcerting the first time, and you just have to remember they're tapping their feet.
Right.
It's the greatest compliment you'll ever get, is these guys watching their stumps go up and down.
And I'll brag on John and company for a second or two, because these guys are accomplished musicians that have played before crowds in the thousands,
Right.
John included. Put them in separate rooms, and they will express that is a more gratifying experience to have that interaction and to give that gift to those vets than playing in front of 1,000 people. And that's why I can't wait for the VA to open back up, because I want to feel that.
Yeah, he's earned his Iron Picker T-shirt like twice. He's played for 12 hours twice, but he can't wait to get in. I mean, he's really chomping at the bit to get back into the VA. Me too. I miss my guys in Durham. And of course, now I'm up in Reidsville, so we'd be playing Kernersville and in Salisbury. But it's one of the best things I ever did. You don't go and play for those veterans and walk out at the end of the evening. You float out.
Wow.
It's just the best thing you've ever done in your life.
Is it because the work that you're doing at that moment that you know that there's therapeutic healing going on?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
it's not just you done a gig, you're at a bar, you're at a festival, and everybody's having a great time.
No, you've contributed.
You've actually done something.
Yeah.
Right.
We had a guy. I went early one time up to the Durham VA and was working with one of the veterans who wanted to be writing songs, and so I was sort of helping him. And this guy comes in his wheelchair. We're in the cafeteria because that was kind of the only big empty room. And he rolls in, and I think he went in to get something to drink or something. But I could tell he was kind of, leaning over, listening,
Right.
and sort of loitering around. And I finally, hey man, come on, come on over. Oh no, Zach, come on. So he rolls over, and I said, well, you name, do the usual introduction. I said, well, you must be a musician. And he goes, well, I used to play, but then I had a heart attack, and my hands and my memory, I can't do it. And Carl, I've never done this before, and I've never done it since. But I looked at that guy and I said an expletive that started with bull.
Yeah.
So essentially said bull crap, and grabbed a guitar and put that guitar up against his chest, and his hands automatically went up.
Right.
And he went to a C chord, and he strummed. And I looked at him and I said, brother, your brain may not remember, but your heart and your fingers remember. And he ended up staying with us and sat in and played. And I was there a couple hours early. At 6:30 we started playing for the veterans, and he came and played with us. And he did about 45 minutes, and the only reason he stopped is at the end of one song he said, my fingers are bleeding. I haven't played in
Wow.
6 years. I don't want to stop, but I have to stop. And just thanked everybody. And of course, one of the coolest things, those guys are really good to each other. And he rolls on out, and I can't describe to you what it's like to watch wheelchair-bound people give a standing ovation. But you knew they were standing for him.
Wow.
And there have been some really powerful, Carl always has tissues nearby, the consummate professional. There's a guy, we were playing once on the 9th floor, the psych ward at the Durham VA. And, you're always kind of got your radar out when you're playing the psych ward. And there's this guy in the back, and I'm pinging on this guy. And, a couple of songs later, he's 10 foot closer, and a couple of songs later, and finally he's kind of almost as close as you are to me. And I'm looking at him, and I'm watching his hands, and I'm like, holy crap, this guy's a guitar player. So I say to Jessica, the therapist, I said, Jess, let's get him a guitar. Well, later I realized that he had no shoelaces and belts and things, and so by all means, John, let's give him a guitar. But there was something about him, and finally Greg, my buddy Greg Eldred, gave him a guitar, and he sat there and he's playing with us. And there's a couple aspects, and I'm sorry, this is a long story, but there's some cool things that you need to hear, or the folks need to hear. So we're playing, and we finished the song, And he leans in and he goes, boys, I don't mean to push my luck here, but does anybody have a pick I can borrow? And we all threw our picks at him. Proud to tell you he's still using my guitar pick all these years later. And we played, and we were there. It's on a Saturday. We were like from 2:30 to 4:30 was when we were supposed to stop. That was the end of Jessica's shift. And I looked at her about 4 for the wrap-up. She said, "No, keep going, keep going." Okay. Looked at her at 5. We start wrapping this up. Get out at 5:30. No, keep going. Finally, at 5:30, I looked at her and she said, "Yeah, wrap it up." And when we finished, she came over and I said, "Didn't your shift end at 4:30?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, how come we didn't wrap up?" And she said, "John," the guy's name was Robert. Robert has been horrible PTSD, completely disassociated, never went to his appointments. If Doc had to look at him, the doc had to go to his room. He would not go to his appointments, didn't interact with anybody. And you're telling me you got this guy playing the guitar and singing and talking to you guys? Ain't no way in hell I'm stopping that. So folks, when you hear the bad things about the VA, remember Jessica and the people like her at that place. There are people those people are wonderful. So we're packing up and we're walking down the aisle to get up. And Robert's in his wheelchair and he starts hoisting himself up. And, for you and me, we just stand up. It took him a good 30 seconds to get to where he's standing up. And then he gets himself together and he fires off a salute. It was the first time we'd ever had a veteran salute us. I'm honored to say that's happened many times since, but it's still a huge deal. And so he saluted us and we were all, wow. And he goes to hand me the pick, and I just looked at him. I said, "Why don't you hang on to that, partner?" And this is God. You're here to help me do the short stories, not the long ones. So fast forward to Monday. We're back in on Monday.
Wait a minute. Did you count the strings?
No. The cool thing is
they were all there.
They were.
Okay,
they were all there. But
good.
The cool thing is that they not only did Jessica send the guitar back to his room with Robert, he kept it the whole weekend. So it's Saturday. He says, "When are you back?" And I said, because I'm thinking, he's on a 24 or 72, maybe a 96-hour hold. I'm like, "Oh, you'll be gone by the time we're back up here in the psych ward." And he looks at me and completely seriously said, "Brother, I'm up here for at least the next 6 months. That's how bad off I am."
Wow.
And and so fast forward, we're in the elevator, bunch of musicians. The elevator doors open. There's Jessica pacing back and forth. She sees me, runs up. John, Robert's here." I'm like, "That's great." Because no, you don't understand. He's been playing the guitar nonstop since you left.
Wow.
And I said, "No, that's great." And she goes, No, you don't understand. He played his guitar till his fingers bled.
Wow.
And I held up my finger and I leaned over my shoulder and I looked and I said, "Boys, raise your hand if you played the guitar till your fingers bled." And everybody put their hands up. "Put your hands down, boys." And she started to say, and I leaned up, looked over my shoulder and again go, "Boys, raise your hand if you kept playing even though your fingers were bleeding." And everybody's hand went up. And I said, "Jess, you need to go talk to the docs and make sure they changed their notes. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing. That guy's coming back." And I am, you talk about the healing power of music. 3 weeks later, he was released to a physical rehab, not a mental rehab, 3 weeks later. And I actually ran into one of his docs. He said, "You're the Marathon Jam guys." Well,
Yeah.
always. And I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "Boy, you guys did a great job on that fella." I don't want to say his name, although I guess we could. But actually we should, because there's several punchlines in that story. One, how wonderful and dedicated those people at the VA are. The incredible healing power of music and what we're doing in there. That I am unbelievably proud to tell you that guy's name is Robert Welch, and he's on the board of directors of Marathon Jam today.
Wow. So you've got someone who experienced the magic.
Yes,
right?
Indeed.
And now he's doing it for others.
He's giving that back.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And he heads up the Kernersville musicians, the hospital volunteers. He's basically the team captain for that. He's been running it for several years, and he's like all of us can't wait to get back in.
You know, you've talked about the VA and things people might say, or hospitals and things people might say. We've done a lot of stories, and I believe there are always those stories that were like, well, that person certainly didn't behave the best way. But for every one that doesn't, there are hundreds more that do the right thing.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, don't you see that to be the case? I mean, to go into that field of work and not care about people, you kind of have to be, you know, something's broken there anyway to go into that field. And like a mechanic, well, if you don't like cars, you probably shouldn't be an auto mechanic, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's all too easy with media, and we're part of that world, but it's too easy to just look at the bad stuff, because there's a little bad stuff and then there's this big stack of good stuff.
Right.
But since everybody's doing the good stuff, it really isn't an odd thing. But isn't it strange that it's odd when we hear the good stuff?
Yes.
Yeah.
We just hear all the gunshot wounds and the
Yeah.
when that's your business, then
Sure.
that's what you're going to see. But now you're in a different kind of business. Sounds like you're in the hope and healing business.
Right.
And you don't
I hadn't
need
thought of that, but I like that.
and you don't need the scalpel. You don't need your stitches are different now, aren't they?
Correct.
How's it changed your life? I mean, obviously you changed your career, right? But how is it when you look at that big picture and say, well, you know, 3 years ago for you stood as a man doing a certain thing, feeling a certain way, being a certain way, and now you look at yourself now. How are you different now, and how has it changed, or has it changed your anticipation, your expectations for the future?
You know, when I first made this move, I was calling it retirement, and it really isn't. It's career change. So I'm still doing the exact same thing I was doing. It's just a different venue and a different instrument.
Wow.
Pun completely intended. But I'm still helping people, and I'm still healing people. And I don't have to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to do it.
Right.
Usually
Now
finish
he's- now
it.
he's up at 2 o'clock in the
2
morning.
o'clock in the morning.
Right.
So no, it's completely streamlined, because I'm still getting to do what I think I was put here to do, but I'm doing it in a different format.
And this thing, if I may, there are very tangible results to this. Last year, we held because of COVID, we held what we called mini marathon jams. So the usual marathon jam will have 30, sometimes 50 musicians in a circle, 150, 200 spectators. We play music together, and all those people get people to sponsor them for every hour they play, and that's how
Right.
we raise our money. And last year, we did the mini marathon jams, and we played on Charles's back porch and raised $10,000. Last year, we gave $10,000 to the Fort Bragg Fisher House. We sent, because a lot of the musicians we play with now are Marines, and they started complaining because we were ignoring the Camp Lejeune
Right.
Fisher House down on the coast, so we sent them $10,000 as well. We gave $3,000 when we were talking about PTSD earlier, a wonderful organization, NC Peer Support. We don't think about the 911 operators getting PTSD, but think about that. You're on the line with somebody, and that woman is saying, "Oh, they're breaking in the house," and then you hear gunshots, and the line goes dead. Those 911 operators have got terrible PTSD. And as a friend of mine, who's actually the vice president of Marathon Jam, Chief Dan Jones, he was the former fire chief for Chapel Hill. He's now VP of Marathon Jam, and a really good friend, was telling me, people think we're talking about being a firefighter, and he goes, "Yeah, I think people think firefighter, and you're the guy who runs up to the building and pulls the little girl out, and 10 seconds later the building collapses. What they don't think about is you're the guy who runs up to the building and it collapses 10 seconds before you can get the little girl." And he told me that story in the middle of, I was teaching him how to play mandolin, and I was sitting on his back porch, and I just was stunned at that because it had never occurred to me. I looked at him and I said, Chief, your guys have PTSD just like my guys. And he said, yeah. And I left there, and we didn't really have a formal board then, but I essentially went and contacted what was our informal board of directors or advisory board, whatever, and said to everybody, we need to start working with first responders as well, because they're dealing with the same stuff. And this NC Peer Support is we gave them $3,000 to try to help them with their mission of taking care of our first responders, PTSD, emotional orders and things like that. And then we gave $2,000 to Camp Corral, which is a wonderful summer camp for kids. They're the children of veteran amputee military. So those kids can go to a camp and talk about, my mom doesn't have her arm, or my dad doesn't have his legs, and everybody's like, oh yeah, me too. Where they can be in a kind of, where they're not, that's not weird for them. It's everybody has that same thing, which I think is pretty wonderful for those kids to have a kind of, to see, feel normal. I don't know, but that's what we do, and every penny we raise, to the best of our ability, stays here in North Carolina, and most of it goes to the Fisher houses at Camp Lejeune and Fort Bragg. But we're always looking for new ways to support our first responders as well.
Yeah, and music is just a way that you can communicate to the human vulnerability that we all have on a personal level.
Right.
Those vulnerabilities that everyone has that they may not want to express, they can deal with that and communicate with that within themselves through music.
And I've had veterans say to me, I haven't felt, at the end of the 10 or 12 hours, say, I haven't felt this close or this kind of connection with other people since I was in country.
Wow.
That's saying a lot.
How do you can that? I understanding that my thought there, I mean, how do we take that type of a feeling, your feeling of being a surgeon and thinking I might retire, and really discovering, just an extension of your vocation, and it's more lyrical than it used to be, and it's got really you're participating. You are participating. You are part of the vibration now, right? So,
Charles, you're part of the vibration. I love it, Carl. Thank you. So you are, and he is, folks.
Yeah. So
bet he is.
We'll do a little song there, right?
Yeah, man.
Wait a minute. Good vibration. They've done that one already.
Change a few words.
But the idea of taking this enthusiasm, because you have a niche, right? You're serving those who serve, right? Those who have served, those who serve in communities now.
It's such an honor.
It is such a special category. But what you're talking about, this healing power, this magic that you found, how can you imagine, how do you see that as being, okay, this is what we're doing, we're going to keep on doing it, but this can empower everyone. This can make, single moms, can find this power, single dads or whoever. Everybody's going through a battle of some sort, right? How do we inspire, how do you inspire other people to tap into this thing?
Before Marathon Jam, and I should tell you how Marathon Jam got started, because that's kind of a funny story, but all I knew was that I was supposed to play music. And the other thing I knew was that if I played music, because I watched the audience and was playing coffee houses solo, right, and then with bands and stuff, and I was doing dance music at one point, but in all those different ways that music affects us, all I knew was that I could make it better for people if I played music. I could make them forget about their life for a few minutes.
So you were doing it then? So when you were younger, before
yeah,
this
any of
organization came along, you were, as a musician,
I wanted to make it better. I knew music made it better. It was an inchoate. I didn't have the words like we do now, and it was just the beginning. But I saw the power of it. I just, particularly, I was playing during the Great American Folk Music Scare. I don't know if you remember that pandemic.
Right.
So that led to a kind of unique thing where you were playing coffee houses and the people would actually come to listen, as opposed to bars where you're playing and everybody's trying to pick up each other, and and right in the middle of a love song, the bartender puts on the blender for the margarita. That actually happened, and my buddy Greg has written this beautiful song, and in the middle of the song, the bartender hit that button. I just put down my guitar and I looked at the guys and I said, "That's it. I'm not playing bars ever again. No more bars for me." Too disrespectful to a beautiful song. But yeah, I knew it could fix things. And in those more intimate listening rooms, coffee houses, things where people were really coming to hear. And I had a good buddy of mine that I wrote songs with for years, Shep Wasdell, who made me listen to Leonard Cohen and great music and great lyric stuff, and said, you need to write your own stuff and you need to talk about things that are important. And you can see it. You can, if only for a little while you're up there playing and you can see them give. I wrote a song called Love's Delirium. It was my attempt to do a kind of a classic jazz song.
Sure.
And we ended up doing it when I had my big band at the last song of the night, because it was the song from which there was no recovery. When you did that, it's pretty much, okay, we got to go home now.
Right.
Whereas with some of the songs, you do a fast song, do another fast song. Well, it was this little jazz ballad thing. It's like, But it was really cool because at first they wanted to keep partying and drinking and stuff, but then you'd see them kind of get slow, and you'd see the guys come and put their arms around the girls, and they're swaying, and what a magical thing to have written a song that you watch people respond to. Charles and I were talking about on the ride up here, about some of these types of things with music, and I played an event down in Charlotte at I can't remember, sadly, the really nice community college down there, but we were the headliners on the Saturday night, and they had done like a 4 or 5 day festival, so we were the last act, and there were a couple of 5,000 people in the audience, and I'd just written this song called "The Blessing of the Strings," and which later became the title track for our CD, and they kept calling us back for an encore, and we didn't really have anything else, and so I said, I'm going to teach you the chorus of this song, and it's a I like it because it's a we getting both of those there, Tim? All right. It's the chorus is it's the gift we've all been given. It's the song we all sing, and the words go on forever in the blessing of the strings. And it was so cool to teach 5,000 people that, and then do the song, and then cue them to come in on the choruses, and at the end the band, we all just stopped and let them sing, and it's still goosebumps all over me. I'm not James Taylor. I don't have Grammys. I haven't played for millions of people. I don't have records all over the place. But I do have a jam session in Coon Rapids, Minnesota. That the last song they play every time they get together is called "The Blessing of the Strings" by a fellow named John Santa.
So you've been doing this for a long time. You've been
long enough to know better.
But you've been doing a little healing all this time. When you can
I just wanted to make it better.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make it better.
You weren't calling it that. You just wanted to make it better.
Yeah.
I love that.
And then when Marathon Jam came together, there was I was writing a lot of music for film and stuff and kind of came in off the road. But I missed seeing a lot of the musicians and hanging out, so I would do little jam sessions over at my house on a Saturday night, out on the carport when it was warm. And one time we're sitting out there, and one of the guys got up and said, I need to work on some harmonies, and I'm going to go sit by these pretty girls over here, because he was going to work on harmonies. That was
right.
that was for Tim, for you guys at home, the video guy. So he went over and sat with them, and he said, I forgot my book, because we're musicians. We know the chords for everything. We can play anything. Holler it out, we'll play it. But we don't know the lyrics. And sadly, I don't even know the lyrics to my own songs often. But they passed the book over, and the book was about that thick, because we'd been getting together for a couple of years. And went by the bass player, who said, holy crap, look at the size of that book. I bet we could play music all day long and never repeat a song. Well, we just looked at each other and said, that sounds like a great excuse to get together and drink beer all day and play music. So we did. We got together in Raleigh a couple of weeks later, and we started at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we turned the last page in that book at 1 in the morning.
Wow.
And that's the only reason why the Marathon Jam is 12 hours long.
So that's your first one?
That was the first one.
Right.
And I'm driving home from that, and I'm talking to my manager, Whit Kenny, who helped with my book, and just a great guy, and said, that was really fun, but it was a lot of work for no result. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, I got a postcard from a buddy of mine, video buddy of mine, saying, give me $5 for every mile I ride on my bike for breast cancer. We should have done something like that. He's like, you're right. So we set up another Marathon Jam, a month, 6 weeks later, got together, played for another 12 hours. The idea being that we would all go out and, bug our friends and raise some money. Well, of course, we're boys, so nobody did that.
Right.
At the end of the night, we stood up and threw some 10s and 5s
Right,
and 20s
right.
on the table.
Right.
Well, we gave $225 to an organization in Raleigh that provides instruments for underprivileged kids and lessons. And you know what? We found out a great thing. It feels really good to give.
Right.
It feels really good to give. That changed my life. And so we started looking for things to do. My bass player's church had a fire, and we gave them $2,000 to help rebuild their church. There was a lady who used to come and listen to us, and God bless her, she got esophageal cancer. It's a horrible way to die. And we paid her rent and bills for the last, 4 months, 5 months of her life, so she didn't have to worry about that stuff. And one day I was announcing, we got a Marathon Jam coming up, because at that point we were doing it yearly. And one of the guys raised his hand and said, I won't be here for it this year. And we're like, well, where are you going to be? And he goes, I'll be in Baghdad, Iraq. And this was back at the very beginning. And I said, what do you mean you're going to be in Baghdad? He goes, I'm getting deployed. And I'm like, but you guys don't have body armor. You're not equipped. We're not, we haven't geared up for this. And he goes, yeah, I'm in the Army. I go where they tell me. So I said, well, then we'll raise money to buy you and the guys in your unit body armor. And he just starts laughing. And he said, John, it probably costs $10,000 just to put body armor on me. And I said, well, we'll raise $10,000 then. And he laughed again, and he said, we've never raised more than $2,500. That year, I'm really proud to tell you, we raised $10,500. And by then they had been supplied. So he came to me and he said, we're supplied. And I said, well, what are we going to do? And tell everybody we're going to play for the military. And he said, I've been thinking about it, and I've talked to a bunch of guys, a bunch of my soldier buddies, and everybody thinks we should play for the Fisher House. And I said the words that I never want anyone else to say, which was, what the heck is Fisher House?
Right.
And so he told me, it's a place that, if you're in the military and your loved one is in a VA hospital, there are facilities near those VA hospitals, and all you have to do is show your military ID, your hospital paperwork, and you can stay there for room and board for free. And I know people who have stayed for a year and a half during long convalescences. And I got a million great stories if you want to go into that, of interactions at some of the Fisher Houses with some of the veterans. But so I said, okay, we'll play for Fisher House, and just because you'll enjoy this, I said, we'll donate it in your name. And he go, oh, no, you're not donating it in my name. And I said, yeah, we'll donate it in your name, you and the unit. he goes, "You're not donating it in my name." And he's like, gets really close to me because I keep saying, "Yeah, we will." And he goes, "John, I'm Special Forces. I know how to kill a man 19 different ways, and all of them are painful. You're not." And I said, "How about we donate it in the name of the group?" We called ourselves the RDU Session Players because most of us were doing studio work. We'll donate the money in the name of RDU Session Players and 18 Airborne. And he goes, "That'll work." And it wasn't, that was the beginning of Marathon Jam. And once we found out the need, and I went to Fisher House and saw what was happening and what they were doing, for good or ill, I suppose it's good, I went up to the manager that first time and said, "I promise you every year I will give you $10,000 for the rest of my life." And we've been doing it for about 20 years now.
Wow.
So the Marathon Jams have raised well over, I guess we should sit down and add it up, but we're well over $250,000 now. And folks think, well, we're not hearing about stuff in the Middle East, that there's not a need. But if you lose your legs, those prosthetics need to be changed, and you need to have constant medical supervision. You can speak to that, right, Doc. And the need is always there. We are, I'm really proud that even with COVID, where people weren't able to go so much to the Fisher House, or they're having to limit, the attendance, we were still feeding them money. And then, like I said, the Marines started griping, so we had to up the ante. So I don't know, about 6 or 8 years ago, suddenly we had to start raising $20,000 every year, and that was a bit of a step for us for a while. But now we do that pretty regularly.
So once you get to that next level, and then it maintains, and then you're ready for the next level.
Well, we hope. We're
right.
What's been truly wonderful is how grassroots this is.
Sure.
Because it really is a bunch of musicians, and you got to keep in mind they're giving up. It's a Saturday. That's a prime income night for most musicians. But they're not only are they giving up that income from that Saturday night to come play with us, not only for free, but for either 10 or 12 hours. But then they have to bug their friends and say, "Give me $5 an hour,"
Right.
Because the name of the game is we want them to come in with a minimum. It used to be 100, but when we took on the Marines at Camp Lejeune, we had to go to $200. If you're going to come sit in the circle, the ante is $200, and you get 50 people coming in to play, and if they all bring $200, you got $10,000. It's pretty cool how it works, and I'm a poor author musician, but every year I get to give away $20,000 or $25,000 to people who really need it, and it makes a big difference in their lives. And then on top of that, there's these wonderful, wonderful ladies who make quilts, make me red, white, and blue quilts for us. And every year I find these veterans, and all their stories are amazing. The veterans, so many of these guys serve, and then they come home, and they they become police, or they go into fire, and some of that is because they're used to a structure and a command
right.
thing that, in uniforms, that feels like home. But so much more of it is a generation and a mindset, and I think a family thing that's been handed down, service, that they are taught that you serve. We serve each other. And so they come home from combat and continue to serve. Many of these older veterans from World War II were battalion chiefs or fire department chiefs, police captains. I mean, you come home and continue to serve because that's what you do. And that's what I think resonates for us, too. We're just trying to serve. We want to serve. And it's just an extension of what the music's always been for me. I just want to make it better. How do I make it better? And here's some people that I know I can make it better for them. And I can go into a VA and play music and watch those stumps go up and down and, tease those guys. And it's just the best feeling in the world. And I'll tell you, one of the best best nights of my life were when we took Robert Welch with us, the guy that we met up on the 9th floor psych ward, back to the Durham VA. And he walked in with us to play for those veterans. And we played, and then we walked out with him. And walking out beside him was absolutely incredible. Here was a guy who was on the psych ward, and he's back there giving back to those guys. And you talk about floating. Oh my God, that was, walking out with him was just, we got outside the doors and we all started crying and hugging each other. And I remember one of the guys, Mike Powell, doctor of history, not a cutter like Charles. We call him Moose from the old college days. And Moose just gives me a hug and he said, "You told me this was powerful, but why didn't you tell me how powerful it was? This is amazing." And it is. It's the best thing you'll ever do in your whole life. Giving is amazing.
John, it sounds to me like that the medicine that you're giving to others now, the medicine you're giving to others and all your friends.
Well, he's still cutting.
Well,
he shows up with a scalpel
he's
sometimes. We don't know what to do with him.
Somebody's got to have the knife and the needle, right? But it sounds to me like that for every ounce of medicine that you're giving out, you're getting 2 or 3 back.
Oh, tenfold.
I mean, you guys have to be the most in vibration. and it almost seems, I mean, this has been an emotional story for you to share. When we talked on the phone, and I said, because you were going over a list of things, we could cover this and cover that, and I'm like, John, I just want us to get to know each other. Let's just have a conversation, get to know each other. Yeah. And in this brief time we've spent together, we haven't been watching the clock, but in this time we've spent together, I've heard healing talked about over and over. I hear the power of music, this notion of vibration. We're in an interesting time now. I think COVID is kind of like the worst of time, the best of time type of a scenario. Yeah. So a lot of very bad things happened. We lost a lot of friends, but there were some wonderful things that happened too. And people discovered something that they didn't know that they had, or maybe the courage to do something that they weren't sure if they could do or not. Yeah. And it's been life-changing for people. So your organization is an organization, it sounds to me like, of where you're helping people, but it is that thing of physician heal thyself, because individually, for all you give, it sounds like the return is magnificent.
Really is. We have a great board of directors who has a vision. This started on my carport.
Right.
I never thought we'd have musicians in every VA hospital in North Carolina. And I've got administrators with the VA who want us to go into Georgia. They want us to keep moving. And the board has way bigger plans for Marathon Jam than ever occurred to me. And I'm so grateful to them. And I'll tell you, you come to one of these jam sessions, not only are a lot of the players just really brilliant, great players, it's the nicest people you will ever meet, because they're all there because they want to give and they want to make it better.
Right.
And it's a weird thing to sit there and you think about, well, you're going to play music for 10 hours, but I'm telling you, at the end of the night, when we finally finish and go, okay, that's it, and everybody gets up and starts hugging everybody.
Right.
I mean, it's, and it's a really cool thing with some of the new players to be handing them that black T-shirt. Mm-hmm. We, at the very beginning of this, we used to kid each other about, well, you come and play and you get the coveted title of Iron Picker. It wasn't coveted. Most of the time we said Iron Picker. They're like, what the heck is that?
Right.
But now it's true. People want that black T-shirt and are really, really proud of it.
It's a badge of honor, right?
Truly. And I'm really proud to wear them. And then, that guy who raised his hand and said, I won't be here, I'll be in Iraq, he took the music over and started what they began to call, the soldiers started calling the Baghdad Bad Boys. And to this day, we wear their patch on our T-shirts. And the other patch we have, we're the only nonprofit charity that's allowed to wear the Fisher House patch. Mm. Nobody else can use it. I mean, you can use it to advertise and stuff, but we have special permission to put that on our shirts because of what we've done for them. And again, every penny of what we've done stays right here in North Carolina. But I'm proud to tell you, there's also been, I have a friend of mine who's a baker, Leanna Cowan, who did some baking out in Redmond, Washington, cooked for 12 hours, and then gave the food to the Fisher houses and raised money selling. And we've had them in Tucson, Arizona, down in Alabama, Richmond, Virginia. There's a big one in Maryland, Washington, D.C. One of the actual Baghdad Bad Boys runs that one up in D.C.
I love that. What's the future look like? And we've got...
Future so bright, got to wear shades.
I would expect you to say that. No, seriously. I mean, you're both, you started an organization. Your life has changed as a doctor of multiple things now. But what does the future look like? What are you hearing within your organization? You've already shared with me that you've got facilities who would like you to be in their places as well. But when you sit around in your board meetings, what do you talk about?
Mostly the board yells at me.
Yeah.
Says you can't do that. You have to run it by the board now. It's not the Wild West like it used to be, John. The board, I'm just really blessed. They have a vision that goes far beyond. I call my second in command is Steve Oglesby, who was a true hero. He was a Huey helicopter pilot at NAM, and he was the guy that flew into hell to pull our guys out. And his call sign was on time because, he wasn't.
Right.
And so we call him OT. And he has amazing vision for where we can take this. He'd like to see it nationwide. There are Fisher houses everywhere across this country, and he wants us to be a presence and a help everywhere. And the guy's incredible. There's a lot of energy to just make this grow. I'm really, really proud, extraordinarily proud of these musicians, because it has been up to now very grassroots. But the fact of the matter is if we're going to keep growing and grow in the kind of way the board wants to, we've got to get more corporate sponsors and stuff. So we're always looking for corporate people. And my buddy Moose that I was telling you about, who's up in Maryland, he keeps telling me, I'll put on a tie and a suit and go door to door and go visit these guys.
So there's interest in growing. There's people who are excited about it, and
if you talk to musicians, John's not unique. Sorry, buddy.
No, I'm not.
Right.
They just want to make it better, and it's contagious.
Right. And you are talking about musicians who are really good musicians. You're talking about, when you talk about session musicians, I know what that means.
Right,
so these are people who, they may not get paid as much as they'd like, but they're still in the industry, if you will, of making music professionally. Yeah. And
now, but to be clear, we welcome beginners. When we're there, and people say, "Well, what do you play?" We have literally done show tunes. One time, we didn't know the chords. We didn't know how to play Oklahoma, and so one lady got up into the middle of the circle of 30 musicians and did an a cappella version of Oklahoma because somebody came up and handed her a check made out to the Fisher House for $50. And we will do anything,
Right.
We've had, over the years, we had tuba show up one time. That was kind of cool. I mean, we'll do blues, we do bluegrass, we'll do jazz, I've actually done some pretty cool versions of Summertime for talking about show tunes. But I mean, we'll play anything, whatever.
So it's not just bluegrass music.
No, it can be anything. We got 12 hours or 10 hours to kill.
Of course.
And so, we'll play anything to kill those 10 hours.
That's exciting.
For the right amount of money, he will even play an Ed Sheeran song.
Got to be a lot of money, though. Not a fan. You might have picked that up. But hey, he's got way more money than me, so what do I know? But it's interesting. We talk about Ed Sheeran. We always we keep thinking we got to find a way to invite him to either a jam session at Charles's place or to the actual Marathon Jam, because I'm not a fan of his music per se, but geez, he seems like a really nice guy. And everybody, even the other guys that we play with who are not particularly fond of him as a musician, go, yeah, he'd be great to hang out with. Let's see if we can get him an invite and have him see if he'll come over and play with us. But we're, I think the future for Marathon Jam is, I think, very bright. There's a great board. We had a great advisory board with Charles and a lot of other really wonderful people, and we're not stopping. The need's there, and I've spent too much time at the Fisher House to see how much it means to these people. To be able to think about it. If your loved one is in Walter Reed, it's $200 a night for a hotel room up there.
Sure.
If they have a extended convalescence, it would decimate the college fund, your savings, everything. And you can go to Fisher House and stay there, room and board. They'll feed you for free for as long as it takes. And there was a point where I think in Obama's administration we had some of the recession thing, and some of the Fisher Houses were charging $5 a night. And I immediately called the Fort Bragg Fisher House. The manager, I think, was Paula Galero back then, but called her and said, Paula, if you guys are even thinking about charging, you call me, because before we will have our service people play, and not on my watch. If they have to pay music to stay or pay money to stay there, we'll do a Marathon Jam every 3 months if we have to make sure that they stay there for free. And thank God they've never charged. But if I can brag a little, that some of the workers who've been there for a long time will tell me every January there's a staff meeting. They pull everybody in, the volunteers and stuff, and they have one of those big sketch pads, and a big thick magic marker, and they have to raise, I can't remember. Do you remember what it is? Is it 50,000 or 100?
So, yeah.
50 grand. So every year that house has to raise $50,000 by themselves, and for 16 years or so, maybe a little bit more now, every year that meeting starts with the house manager walking up, putting a minus sign, writing 10,000, and then putting MJ beside it. And then says, okay, they look at the staff and says, okay, now let's talk about how we raised our $40,000 this year. And I'm so proud of that. I'm so proud of that. I'm so proud of all of our players. I'm really proud of my Iron Picker Corps. God bless all of them, all those men and women. I'm really, really proud of the hospital volunteers. And I know they're chomping at the bit to get back in. Charles is going crazy, and me too. We want to get back in there and play for them.
Obviously, that'll be happening soon.
God, I hope so.
Yeah, it will. John, I think it's time that we've talked about all this great healing music that you've been sharing with folk. Why don't you share a little with our audience now?
Oh, dear. Now, Carl, I need to tell you something.
Go ahead.
Okay, and I want you to listen to me. Okay?
I'm listening.
All right. I open the refrigerator.
Yes.
The light comes on.
Right.
I do 15 minutes about best material.
Right.
Okay. Once I start playing, are you prepared to be here till 9 o'clock tonight?
Well, it's already 8:45, so we're good. I was well prepared. I knew that our time together would be enjoyable. So
I want to thank you so much. This has really, really been.
It's been incredible.
Yeah, really, really great. And I hope some of it makes the edit to actually get on air.
Oh, I think so. I think it will, don't you, Tim?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tim likes the long. It depends upon the subject matter. Sometimes he says that was really long, and then other times he'll say that went by really fast, and it truly was really long. So this is. I think anytime we can take an opportunity to share our real life stories and our feelings, I think it's therapeutic for everybody.
Absolutely.
Right?
Well, we've got 6.5 hours.
Yeah. You're multiplying by 4, right?
No, that's what it says here. We got.
Oh, you mean
We have 6.5 hours left we can record.
That we could go. Okay. How long did we go?
Don't do that one, John.
Near
Don't
about
go
2
that.
hours.
2 hours. Wow. Well.
A couple hours.
Yeah. I bet you guys are great. I mean, you obviously been doing this a long time. You make it really easy.
Well,
And thank you.
We have
There's a real skill.
aerosols that we pipe in the air, and you've actually been you know about that hospital medication.
Yeah,
so
we're
it
drugged.
makes you
Yeah.
It's gone off 5 times since we started.
So I don't. What
Okay.
do you? Let me see. What?
It's your moment. So there's something. So, no. Something that's.
What did you say,
something
Tim?
that's
Smoky Mountain Red.
Let me do.
something that makes.
Old time Baltimore blues.
You know, you should do the Hickory Wind on the guitar as well.
Well, yeah, that my buddy Greg says I do the best version of Hickory Wind he's ever heard,
Wow.
which is a great compliment. One of these times, if you ever want to do a thing on songwriting, I'd be really glad to bring him up. And we both approached. I'm a guy who I majored in journalism, minor in creative writing, so I
Right.
have thesauruses and
Right.
and rhyming dictionaries and stuff. And he doesn't do any of that.
It's all natural for him.
Yeah. He's been playing since he was 6. So.
I've done several songwriter in the round segments.
Well, if you ever, he's a brilliant songwriter.
Right.
So, are you going to play or not? You're not. Did you bring your guitar in? Or not?
I brought your guitar in.
Okay. All right. So. You would think after like 40.
Mics to where you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
40 some years, I would get an actual harmonica holder, a new one. All right, so we can try this. It's the only original song that I'm pretty sure I'll remember all the lyrics to. I forget lyrics, it's terrible. All right, this is called Lord, Lord, Lord.
You got his audio there? Okay.
We'll
good.
be okay? Yeah. All right, so I look out my window, blue skies are falling, rain on my dreams, most appalling. I look at the sky, hear that devil cry, Lord, 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 I love you. Lightning flashes across the sky, and the thunder crashes, and so do I. I look at the sky, hear that devil cry, Lord, 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 I love you, yes I do. Too loose. Rain on my window silently weeps, pain on my heart is bitterly sweet. Every time that I see you, my heart skips a beat. Lord, Lord, I love you, yes I do. Wet watercolors hang from the trees, and the rain touches everyone. It heals the disease. Somewhere blue skies live. Give it all you can give. Lord, Lord, Lord. I said, Lord, Lord, I love you. Right.
So is that the song that you heard on his website before you called to book your session with him? You want him to teach you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty similar to that for sure.
Wow.
That was one my buddy Shep Wasdell and I wrote back in our college days. And sadly, he passed when he was about 50. And it's one of the ways I keep him alive is by doing our songs together.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah. Life's good.
Life is pretty darn good. And as they say, beats the alternative. And it's particularly better if you got a lot of music in it.
Yeah. There you go. Thanks a lot, John.
Really a pleasure, Carl.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you, Charles.
Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Great.
Thanks for listening to the Life in the Carolinas podcast. If you enjoyed your time with us, please visit the show's website at lifeinthecarolinas.com. Join our mailing list, and we'll keep you updated every week on what we have coming up and other interesting things around the Carolinas. We value you as a podcast subscriber. We'll see you next week. And remember what Carl says, it's never a bad time for a good story.